Well, morning, fellow zombies. Especially to the folks out in Florida who are getting their Florida welcome, courtesy of Adelia, knocking on their front doors, unfortunately. And yeah, it's pretty nasty out there. I mean, watching it on the Weather Channel out here in the West Coast and seeing what's going on, and yeah, you guys are getting it. I got a cousin that still lives out there in Georgia, and I worry about her. Uh, According to what the storm tracks and what their future forecasts were telling us, they're not going to be able to worry about the brunt of it, but they are going to be dealing with tropical storm or just a storm warning coming through. What I worry more about is tornado activity, especially when we're dealing with hurricanes going through the East Coast, especially the lower end of the East Coast, generally where the warmer water is to keep motivating the storms. And I'm worried whether or not if the damp storm is going to be circulating itself back. Right now, I'm watching Jim Cantori, one of my favorite meteorologists on the Weather Channel, talking about storm surge and showing a hotel out in Cedar Key, Florida. Uh, the storm surge is, the waters are rising. The water's rising. I've been watching hurricanes on the Weather Channel, and they either excite me or terrify the living crap out of me. Especially when you have creatures that live in the Florida Panhandle, like alligators and snakes. I deal with them on a constant basis out there. And I'm not groovy to the idea of dealing with that. It's bad enough I got to deal with spiders and roaches as it is currently. I worry about snakes in the area that I live in a desert region, and we got Mojave rattlers out there. So I always have to worry about whether or not something's going to be slithering in a household or not. And anything on the property is going to be scaring the living crap out of us. They don't like hanging around with people, and I don't like hanging around with them either. I'm not a herpetologist, and I don't like snakes. Never had. Alligators? No way. Right now, they're showing a bit of wind action out in Cedar. Looks like a bit almost of a hurricane, tornado, water spout or something. But it's pretty damn windy out there. I was trying to tell in the other videos about how I used to be this way and how I used to be that way in storms and rainstorms like that. I kept making the joke left and right about I'll trade you an earthquake over a hurricane, so at least a hurricane you know where the hell the damn thing's coming from. But the thing is, in dealing with a hurricane as it is, it's still devastating. It still loses people left and right. Flooding mostly, trapping people in cars. You don't get killed as much with wind unless you're going to be having something driven into your body. If you stay inside, that's where they generally die, is getting trapped inside a storm. If they're barricaded enough, if they've got enough supplies, cool. But they still get dead bodies because places get flooded out. I'd seen too much in the news stories about those throughout the decades. This usually scares the hell out of me, and I'm not quite sure how to deal with that one. I mean, every hurricane, they try to say it's a little different because they get a different name. It's still the same because you're dealing with wind, you're dealing with tides, and you're dealing with a hell of a lot of water. The tides are the water doing the storm surges flowing through areas, knocking out businesses and houses left and right, taking down power lines. The winds will do that. And then the water around the area will be electrified if there are charged lines down there. Now, it's one thing if we happen to have earthquakes out here in the Southland that if we get in a situation where there's going to be down power lines, we have to be careful about those damn things because we don't know if they're live or not. Excuse me. At least we can see them out there. I don't know how long and how with the distance electricity will cover to shock the living crap out of you. But they're always saying you got to be careful when it comes down from down power lines. Yeah, if it's on the ground you can see it, but in the water, forget it. You're dead. It's one thing being scared as hell about fires. Once you see a fire out in the distance, you wonder if it's going to be coming up towards you or not. If we're talking about 10 or 15 or 20 miles, I don't worry as much. But I know fires like to go uphill, not downhill as much. But they will burn downhill and then burn up. And because they do that, I always have to worry about whether or not the fire is coming in our way or not. We got brush all over the place outside the apartment complex. We have it all over the area. All it takes is a good spark, and without anybody else trying to stop the fire anyway, it's got enough out there to burn things up. I'm more worried about being trapped by fire than I am about a hurricane situation. Since never I've lived through that situation, I'm glad I haven't. But it makes me worry about it and be fearful about it anyway. Earthquakes, sometimes I'll feel it once in a while, something maneuvering left and right, and I'm wondering whether or not I'm losing my sense of touch or feel concerning about the earthquakes. Gone through a lot of them, and they still scare the shit out of me. A 3 or 4 will make me listen. Okay, was that a 3 or 4? Okay, nothing major. Okay, breathing. We're fine. We're talking about maybe a 4 to a 5. Then I'm saying things shifting around a bit. I'm like, okay, now what are we getting into? If the momentous energy keeps building up on it, um, if it keeps going, then I worry about whether or not the building I'm in is going to be able to withstand maybe a 5 or a 6er. And if it does, okay, but I'm not going to like it because things are going to be crashing down a little bit. Now, because of the bug war I've been experiencing for about a year and a half already in this place, dealing with the damn roaches, I've taken dishes out of the cabinets. I've taken food out of the cabinets. I've been basically living in the living room. All the refrigerator stuff is still in the refrigerator. But there's not one bit of dishes, plates, glasses anywhere in the cabinet. They're all out, or the ones I'm using are out and being put into a dishwasher and washed constantly. The rest of them are packed away somewhere. Pots and pans I'll grab out and wash with, use them up and keep circulating them. Just I have a box that has the flatware in it and cookware, cooking utensils. After they get dried off, they get put into the box so I know where the hell they are, as well as every other um, utensil I use. So what I'm using, I'm constantly using it from the living room. I'm trying to use up everything else I can in the living room and replenishing what I can. But for replenishable foods, it's the refrigerator or left out a little bit. Fruits like bananas could be outside for maybe 3 or 4 days before they're really dead. So I try to eat them up as fast as I can. Bread will last maybe about 3 or 4 weeks if I'm lucky enough without the bugs getting into it. And the potatoes maybe about a month if the moisture hasn't got to them. They're not sprouting, and there's no cool, dry place I can keep these things in where they don't. So I have to deal with on a constant basis of food circulation. Watching what I'm watching online right now, it's still terrifying because now I'm seeing this hurricane going through different areas, tearing things apart left and right, and worrying about a cousin who lives out in Georgia, whether or not the storm surge or actually the rain and the winds are going to be generating tornadoes and tearing her ass apart. Well, when it comes down for an earthquake out here in the Southland, if we're close enough to the epicenter, and if it's a good strong one, I'm likely to see damages around this place if we actually get one right by us. And it's got to be sufficient, about 6 to a 7, to really do the cracking in this place. The ground will just undulate like a wave. And feeling that effect is a little nauseating. Makes me feel like my inner ear just went up for a swim, and I'm just as old as I am going through this damn stuff. It still scares the crap out of me. But that's what happens. Watching these things scare the crap out of me. It's fascinating and it's terrifying. I learned a little bit more about meteorology listening to these guys, watching the storms coming through, tearing places apart left and right, and learning what areas to cover if I actually want to go there or not. But this is still nerve wracking. An earthquake kicks. We won't know anything until the damage has already been done. We can't see it coming, it just hits. And then we got to deal with that. Question to myself is, how do I deal with that? I can be I can be a complete fool and idiot doing bravado, saying that I've been through a hurricane. No, not hurricane. I've been through an earthquake. I've been through many earthquakes. I'm tough. I'm saying I've been through Slimer, 71, and we felt it all over the valley and beyond. But we felt that bastard. And that was the first earthquake I actually experienced in my lifetime. And it scared the crap out of me. Sorry, Jim Cantori, but I gotta put you off because I am not dealing with this in the morning for right now. I am just not happy and not dealing with this. So I'm going to switch it back over to national news, and they'll probably drown us out with the rest of this crap. Or with politics, or God knows what else they got going on. Weather Channel will be covering this thing entirely. Oh, there we are. Cat 4 kicking their asses. And they'll have the short shit in there somewhere. It's probably already did it. Doing their Florida bad news situation. Anyway. Well, we actually had the earthquakes out here. I remember some of the larger ones when we were talking about 6, almost a 7. Well, close to it anyway. Whittier Narrows, Landers, we felt them. Malibu, I wasn't quite sure if I felt that one or imagined that one. Northridge, that was the largest earthquake I've ever been through. The damn thing felt like a 7 or an 8. I said it was about 6.4. I don't think so. I think it was larger than that. By the energy it was expelling, holy shit. And it felt like it lasted an eternity, but it only lasted maybe about a minute. And even a minute can do a hell of a lot of damage. But even a minute is an eternity when we're dealing with an earthquake, shaking the living crap out of everything else. I remember hearing the screamings and yellings and people racing around trying to see if everybody else is all right. Neighbors trying to find out if their loved ones, if their dogs are right, if their pets are okay, the places are collapsed or anything else like that. And it's terrifying. I kept telling people in the lousiest joke of ever that I'd rather see a hurricane coming because at least I can avoid it. Well, could I? I mean, yeah, if I'm going to be seeing this slow bastard coming through and knowing it's going to be kicking my ass, and then knowing that there's going to be days and weeks after that, it's going to be hell on earth that I can't even survive through. When we had the earthquake of the 94, it was a lot worse than dealing with 71 because I saw the devastation all around the valley. Ma stayed home with the dogs. Dave and I were out getting supplies. And we were also taking assessments. If we actually had cameras that worked during that time, we would be taking shots of the whole area. I mean, if we actually had camera phones during that time, we would be doing videos and camera shots of all over the damn place. I mean, they did have print during those days. They did have film, actual film for cameras. And I'd seen the images coming through the film of what used to be, and I'd seen it personally. An office building my mama went to for medical services, the front was sheared off. Plain brute force. I'd seen the images of a hospital crumbling, an office building right next to it devastated in the front, and parts of the chunk already ripped off, face of it gone. Apartment buildings flattened. Northridge Meadows was the one they made more of publicized. I remember seeing that, and it scared the living crap out of me. They were showing on their own televisions. They got news crews out there with the news cameras watching things, and they showed up on Northern Rinaldi, well past, actually, Northern Balboa, well past Rinaldi, in some of the areas that they had fire and flood. Fire from gas line that busted, and flooding because of the water lines were busted. It was the eeriest photograph, and I had friends living in that area who actually saw it. I don't think they ever got over it, but I'd seen desperation for supplies. I'd seen how retailers, small retailers, the 7-Elevens during that time, gouging people for a bottle of water. $10 for a gallon of water. $10 for a gallon of water. How about $10 for a loaf of bread? $15 for a small pack of batteries for two. They charged as much as they could. Right after the earthquake, California set up some gouging laws. That during an emergency, they can only charge 10% above retail price that they got posted. Basically, if you got an item for $1, it's going to be $1.10, and that's it. Not $5 for one little stick of gum. Go over to parks and you see National Guard setting up bivouacs, places for people to sleep if they needed to, or just sit there for a bit. They got MREs passed out left and right. water distilled out of these huge tanks that they bring. And certain areas actually did have medical. Hospitals were overrun. Hospitals were damaged and they were still overrun. Granada Hills was evacuating. They could try dealing as much as what they could, and they got red tagged. They had to be demolished. Now, in its place of the medical office in the hospital is a school, a high school. No, actually, I think it's a junior high or something like that, but they had a school out there. Instead of a medical facility that they actually craved and needed. And the constant need for charcoal because you need to cook with. We had barbecues that took charcoal. That's how we were able to cook our food. We'd gotten meat from different places, enough ice to keep them in storage, and we had storage cases, so we kept it alive for about 2 or 3 days until our house was almost declared safe enough to live in. But my landlord managed to make the place safe enough. We lived there for several more years after the quake. It was a decade afterwards. And I was still scared as hell. We felt the aftershocks for weeks. I used to work in a tall building as a file clerk, general office actually. And every time that damn thing shook, I was scared shitless. I bought myself some, or somehow I managed to obtain light sticks. In my cubicle area that they actually had me in, I actually had it made where if there was going to be any shaking going on, I wanted to know about it. Unless, if it was me shaking, it's one thing. But if I saw that damn thing shaking badly, the place was built from what the stories were telling me. The Trillium complex, the two towers that they had, were on rollers. Well, they did do damage on the inside, but not as much on the outside. But for the parking lot that they actually had, the covered parking lot with a tennis court and swimming pools in the area, they were damaged beyond repair. The company I worked for, it actually had a satellite office out in Century City. My brother had to drive me over there every day. Had a lot of gas. San Fernando Valley over to Century City. It's oh yeah. So I actually tried to decide to take a bus to get down there. That was even worse. It was only for a couple of weeks, and after that, came back to the office out in Warner Center. Maintenance actually did what they could, and then decided that the next time we had a major quake, everything was going to be bolted to the deck. So all the cabinets were bolted. I'm still watching the Weather Channel. Well, actually CNN right now. They're showing Crystal River, Florida right now. It's 6:52 on their side, Eastern morning, and it's just about hitting them right now. The eye wall. Actually, it's hitting them right now. It's made landfall. And I was seeing lightning happening, and it's rattling my cage right now a bit. Seeing this crap. I know, it's just news, right? Nothing's happening out here in the Southland. Nothing. Except we're getting baked, roasted, roasted, and God knows what else we had going on. But for the most part, I am rattled. And I'm switching over to one of the news stations to probably avoid it or probably watching more of it. But the local stations out here in the Southland. Let me do another one here.